Alexander Marcus Zanetti's grip tightened around his fountain pen as he stared at the email confirming what he'd suspected for weeks. Willow Aston was officially bidding for the Hawthorne Maritime Redevelopment Project, a $1.2 billion contract that could redefine the eastern seaboard's shipping infrastructure. His jaw clenched. 34 years old, a self-made shipping magnate with a fleet spanning 3 continents, and now he faced competition from the one person in the industry who made his blood boil and his pulse quicken, though he'd rather fire himself than admit the latter. "Damn it," Marcus muttered, pushing back from his mahogany desk, the Manhattan skyline stretching behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. He loosened his tie and pressed the intercom. "Claire, get me everything on Aston Maritime's proposal for Hawthorne, and I mean everything." His assistant's voice came through clearly. "Already on it, sir. Also, the board wants to know if you'll be attending the industry gala next week. It's apparently mandatory for all Hawthorne bidders." Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair. "Tell them I'll be there. And have Tom prepare the jet. I want to visit our Baltimore operations tomorrow. If we're going to beat Aston Maritime, we need to showcase our regional expertise." After his assistant disconnected, Marcus walked to the window, watching the city lights begin to flicker on as dusk settled. Willow Aston. Just the thought of her made his chest tighten with a mixture of frustration and something else he refused to acknowledge. They'd crossed paths at industry events, exchanged barbed comments during panel discussions, and competed fiercely for contracts over the past 3 years. Her company had emerged seemingly from nowhere to challenge Zanetti Shipping's dominance in several key markets. What irritated him most wasn't just her business acumen, it was her self-assured smile, the way she could dismantle his arguments with a few carefully chosen words, and how she never seemed intimidated by his reputation or wealth. Unlike others in the industry who deferred to him, she treated him like an equal, no like a rival worth defeating. The next morning, Marcus's private jet touched down in Baltimore. As his driver navigated the busy streets toward the port, he reviewed Aston Maritime's public financial statements. The company had grown impressively under Willow's leadership since she'd taken over from her mentor 4 years ago. Despite his best efforts to find weaknesses, her business model was solid. "We're here, sir," his driver announced, pulling up to the Zanetti shipping terminal. Marcus stepped out into the bright sunshine, immediately spotting Tom Reeves, his regional operations director, waiting with several other executives. They walked the facility, discussing improvements and potential innovations to include in the Hawthorne proposal. As they approached the main shipping lane, Marcus spotted a sleek vessel with a distinctive teal-blue trim pulling into a neighboring berth. His stomach tightened as he recognized the Aston Maritime logo. "Is that?" he began. Tom nodded. "Miss Aston is conducting a site survey today. Apparently, she likes to personally inspect potential project locations." "Of course she does," Marcus muttered. "Continue the tour, I'll catch up." Against his better judgment, Marcus walked toward the Aston Maritime vessel. As he approached, he saw her Willow Aston, dressed in tailored navy slacks and a crisp white blouse, her chestnut hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She was pointing at something on a tablet, deep in conversation with a man in a hard hat. "Checking out the competition, Miss Aston." Marcus called out, unable to help himself. Willow turned, her green eyes widening slightly before that composed smile he knew so well settled on her face. "Marcus Zanetti, I was wondering when you'd appear." She handed the tablet to her colleague and approached. "Just doing my homework." "I assume you're doing the same." "I don't need to study the competition. I know this port better than anyone," he replied, maintaining a confident stance despite the strange flutter in his chest. "Is that why you lost the Singapore contract to us last year?" Willow asked, her smile never faltering. "Because you knew the market so well," Marcus felt heat rise to his face. The Singapore loss had been a significant blow one he hadn't expected. "A temporary setback, one that won't be repeated with Hawthorne." "We'll see," she said, extending her hand. "May the best proposal win." He hesitated before taking her hand. Her grip was firm, her skin soft, but her handshake confident, just like everything else about her. "It will," he assured her, holding the handshake a moment longer than necessary. For a brief instant, something passed between them, a current that wasn't entirely hostile. Then she withdrew her hand and the moment vanished. "I should get back to my survey," Willow said, her professional demeanor firmly in place. "I assume I'll see you at the industry gala next week." Marcus nodded. "I wouldn't miss it." As he watched her walk away, he couldn't help but notice the way she commanded attention without demanding it, a quality rare in their industry. Shaking his head to clear it of unwelcome thoughts, he returned to his waiting team. The Hawthorne contract would be his. It had to be. The week passed in a blur of meetings, proposal revisions, and strategic planning. By the time the industry gala arrived, Marcus had convinced himself that his momentary distraction in Baltimore was nothing more than professional curiosity. The event was held at the Grand Plaza Hotel, its ballroom transformed into an elegant space filled with the shipping industry's elite. Marcus arrived fashionably late, his custom-made tuxedo drawing appreciative glances as he made his way through the crowd, shaking hands and engaging in the necessary small talk. He was in the middle of a conversation with a potential investor when he saw her enter. Willow wore a floor-length emerald gown that complemented her eyes, her hair cascading in waves over one shoulder. She moved through the room with effortless grace, greeting people warmly. "Excuse me," Marcus said to the investor, suddenly finding it difficult to concentrate. He made his way toward the bar, ordering a scotch and watching as Willow charmed a group of influential Port Authority officials whose support would be crucial for the Hawthorne project. "Mr. Zanetti," came a voice beside him. "You look like a man plotting his next conquest." Marcus turned to find Harold Hawthorne himself, the silver-haired patriarch whose family foundation was behind the redevelopment project. "Mr. Hawthorne," Marcus smiled, shaking the older man's hand. "Just observing the competition." Hawthorne followed Marcus's gaze to where Willow stood. "Ah, Miss Aston, remarkable young woman. Built that company into something impressive in just a few years. Very innovative thinking." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Innovation without experience can be risky." "Perhaps," Hawthorne conceded, "but sometimes fresh perspectives are exactly what's needed." He clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "I look forward to both your proposals. The committee will be making decisions based on merit alone, no favoritism for established names." As Hawthorne moved away, Marcus took a long sip of his scotch. The idea that Willow might actually win this contract was becoming a real possibility, and it unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Later, as the evening progressed, Marcus found himself alone on the terrace, needing a moment away from the noise and networking. He leaned against the railing, looking out at the city skyline when he heard the door open behind him. "Running away from your adoring public." Willow's voice carried a hint of amusement. Marcus turned to face her. "Just getting some air. The room was becoming stifling." "I know what you mean," she said, joining him at the railing, standing close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and floral. "These events are necessary evils." For a moment they stood in silence, the distant sound of the party creating a backdrop to the unexpected peace between them. "Why shipping?" he asked suddenly, curious despite himself. Willow looked surprised by the question. "My father was a dockworker in Portland. I grew up watching ships come and go, wondering where they'd been and where they were heading." She smiled at the memory. "I studied engineering, then maritime law. When Robert Aston offered me a position at his company, I jumped at the chance. I never expected to end up running it." "When he retired, when he died," she corrected softly. "Heart attack 3 years into my tenure. He'd been grooming me as his successor, but I wasn't supposed to take over so soon." Marcus studied her profile in the soft light. "I'm sorry, I didn't know," Willow shrugged. "It's not something I advertise. What about you? Was Zanetti shipping always your destiny? In a way, Marcus admitted. My grandfather started with one fishing boat. My father expanded to commercial shipping. When I took over, we were respectable but regional. He couldn't help the pride in his voice. Now we're global. Hence the famous Marcus Zanetti ego, she teased, but there was no malice in her tone. I prefer to call it well-earned confidence, he retorted, finding himself smiling. Willow laughed, the sound unexpectedly musical. You know, in another life we might have been friends rather than rivals. Is that what we are, rivals? What would you call it? She asked, turning to face him fully. Under the moonlight, with the city glittering behind her, Marcus found himself momentarily speechless. There was an intelligence in her eyes that challenged him, but also something else, a warmth he hadn't allowed himself to notice before. Competitors with healthy respect for each other, he said finally. Is that so? Willow raised an eyebrow. I was beginning to think you viewed me as an irritating upstart who didn't deserve a seat at the table. Marcus winced. Have I really been that transparent, like glass? She confirmed, but she was smiling. It's all right. I'm used to it in this industry. Before he could respond, the terrace door opened and one of Willow's associates appeared. Willow, sorry to interrupt, but the Maritime Commission chairman is asking for you. She nodded, then turned back to Marcus. Duty calls. She hesitated, then added, this was surprisingly pleasant. As she walked away, Marcus found himself staring after her, puzzled by the strange disappointment he felt at her departure. For the first time, he'd seen Willow Aston as more than just a business rival. He'd glimpsed the person behind the professional facade. And that person intrigued him far more than he wanted to admit. The following weeks became a strange dance of professional competition and growing personal awareness. During the day, Marcus threw himself into perfecting Zanetti Shipping's proposal for the Hawthorne project, determined to win at all costs. But at night, thoughts of Willow kept intruding. Her laugh on the terrace, the passion in her voice when she spoke about her work. 2 weeks before the final proposals were due, Marcus found himself in Washington, D.C., meeting with federal regulatory officials whose approval would strengthen his bid. As he exited the government building, a familiar voice called his name. Marcus, I thought that was you. Willow approached, dressed in a tailored gray suit, her hair twisted into a neat bun. She looked every inch the successful executive, lobbying the feds. He asked, falling into step beside her as they walked toward the street. Just dotting I's and crossing T's, she replied. You? Same. He glanced at his watch. Have you had lunch? The question surprised them both. Willow hesitated, then nodded. I could eat. They found a small bistro a block away, secluded enough that they wouldn't likely run into industry colleagues. Over pasta and mineral water, they carefully avoided discussing the Hawthorne project directly, instead talking about industry trends and mutual acquaintances. So, is it true that you turned down an acquisition offer from Meridian Group last year? Marcus asked, curious about the rumor that had circulated. Willow nodded, twirling pasta around her fork. They wanted to absorb Aston Maritime into their conglomerate. The money was substantial. But you refused. It wasn't just my decision to make, she said. I have employees who depend on our company culture, our values. Meridian would have gutted our operations and kept just the client list. Marcus studied her. Most people would have taken the money and walked away. I'm not most people, Willow replied simply. This isn't just a business to me, it's a legacy I promise to protect. The conviction in her voice stirred something in Marcus. Here was someone who understood exactly what drove him, not just profit but purpose. What about you? She asked, changing the subject. The infamous bachelor billionaire, the tabloids seem to think you'll never settle down. Marcus laughed. The tabloids greatly exaggerate my personal life. Between expanding the business internationally and maintaining our market position, there hasn't been much time for entanglements. Entanglements, Willow repeated, amused. Is that what you call relationships? No wonder you're still single. Her teasing caught him off guard and he found himself laughing genuinely. Fair point. What about you? No shipping magnate waiting at home. Something flickered across her face. No, similar reasons, I suppose. The company takes everything I have. She glanced at her watch. Speaking of which, I should get going. I have a conference call in 30 minutes. As they left the restaurant, Marcus found himself reluctant to end their encounter. This was nice, he said, echoing her words from the gala. Willow studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Yes, it was. Good luck with your proposal, Marcus. You too, he replied automatically, then added, though not too much luck. Her laughter followed him as they parted ways, and Marcus realized with a jolt that he was in dangerous territory. He was beginning to like Willow Aston far more than was prudent for a competitor. Back in his hotel suite, Marcus tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting to lunch, to the way Willow's eyes lit up when she spoke about her company's humanitarian initiatives, to the subtle freckles across her nose that he'd never noticed before. His phone rang, disrupting his thoughts. It was Claire, his assistant. "Sir, there's been a development with the Hawthorne proposal," she said, her voice tense. "Our primary environmental consultant just backed out, says he's received a better offer. We need to find a replacement immediately." Marcus felt cold dread settle in his stomach. "Who made the offer?" There was a pause. "Aston Maritime, sir." The news hit him like a physical blow. Had the lunch been a distraction tactic? Had Willow known about the poaching attempt? The thought left a bitter taste in his mouth. "Find a replacement," he instructed Claire. "Whatever it takes." After hanging up, Marcus paced the hotel room, anger building. Just when he'd started to see Willow differently, this happened. It confirmed what he should have remembered all along in business: there were no friends, only competitors. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Aston Maritime's DC office unannounced, brushing past the startled receptionist and striding directly toward Willow's office. Her assistant jumped up to intercept him, but Marcus was already pushing open the door. Willow looked up from her desk, surprise evident on her face. "Marcus, what are you? Was lunch a setup?" he demanded, closing the door behind him. "A way to distract me while you poached my environmental consultant." Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by indignation. She stood up. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Dr. Richards. Your company offered him double his fee to switch sides." Willow's expression shifted from confusion to realization, then to anger. "I did not authorize that, and I certainly wouldn't use a personal lunch as a business tactic." "Then explain how it happened." "I will," she said firmly, reaching for her phone. "James, could you come to my office immediately and bring the Richards contract?" While they waited in tense silence, Marcus observed Willow. Despite his anger, he couldn't deny the poise with which she handled the confrontation. She wasn't defensive or flustered, she was controlled and focused on resolving the issue. A knock at the door preceded the entrance of a nervous-looking young man carrying a folder. "You wanted to see me, Miss Aston? James, did you recently recruit Dr. Richards from Zanetti Shipping for our environmental assessment?" The man glanced anxiously between Willow and Marcus. "Yes, madam. As we discussed in the strategy meeting last month, we needed to strengthen our environmental credentials. Dr. Richards was at the top of the list you approved for recruitment." Willow's expression hardened. "When exactly did I approve poaching directly from our main competitor for Hawthorne?" James paled. You said to pursue all names on the list aggressively." You assumed wrong," Willow interrupted. "We do not operate that way." She held out her hand for the folder. "Leave this with me. We'll discuss your decision-making process later." After the man left, Willow opened the folder, examined its contents, then passed it to Marcus. "The offer was made 2 days ago before our lunch, and it appears to have been an independent initiative by an overzealous team member." She met his gaze directly. "I don't play dirty, Marcus. That's not how I do business." Marcus reviewed the documents, his anger slowly subsiding as the timeline became clear. The lunch hadn't been a setup. "I apologize for the accusation," he said finally, closing the folder. "Apology accepted. Willow replied, her voice softening slightly, though I understand the reaction. In your position, I might have assumed the same. An awkward silence fell between them, the easy rapport from lunch replaced by professional caution. What will you do about Richards? Marcus asked finally. Willow sighed. Ethically, I can't rescind an offer once made. But I can promise you that this wasn't a deliberate attempt to undermine your proposal. Marcus nodded, accepting her word. As he turned to leave, Willow called after him. Marcus, for what it's worth, I enjoyed our lunch yesterday. No ulterior motives. He paused at the door. So did I, he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. The Richards incident created a strange turning point in their relationship. Over the next week, they exchanged occasional text messages, professional at first, regarding industry news or clarification on regulatory changes, but gradually becoming more personal. 3 days before the final proposals were due, Marcus's phone rang late in the evening as he worked in his New York penthouse. Seeing Willow's name on the screen, he answered immediately. Working late? He asked by way of greeting. Always, she replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. I was wondering if you'd heard about the Hawthorne Committee's last-minute requirements change. Marcus frowned. No, what change? They're asking for an additional community impact assessment, just announced it an hour ago. Cursing under his breath, Marcus moved to his computer to check his emails. That's going to require substantial revisions. I know, Willow sighed. I've got my team working through the night. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. There was a pause. Because I want to win fairly. If I get this contract, I want it to be because my proposal was better, not because you missed a last-minute change. The admission touched him unexpectedly. Thank you, he said, the words inadequate for the warmth spreading through his chest. You're welcome, she replied softly. Good night, Marcus. Good night, Willow. After they hung up, Marcus sat motionless, staring at his phone. The realization hit him with the force of a tidal wave. He was falling for Willow Aston. The woman who could potentially cost him the biggest contract of his career was the same woman who now occupied his thoughts day and night. The situation was impossible. Even if she felt the same way, how could anything develop between them with the Hawthorne project hanging in the balance? One of them would win, one would lose, and either outcome would complicate any personal relationship beyond repair. Yet, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her intelligence, her integrity, her quiet confidence. For the first time in his life, Marcus Zanetti was at a complete loss about how to proceed. The day of the final presentations arrived with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Marcus had barely slept, rehearsing his pitch until the words were embedded in his memory. Zanetti Shipping's proposal was exceptional, innovative while building on their established expertise, financially sound while addressing environmental concerns. The Hawthorne Foundation had arranged for all finalists to present on the same day, in the same Boston Hotel Conference Center, where the committee would deliberate immediately afterward. Marcus arrived early, reviewing his notes in a private room set aside for presenters. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. When he opened it, Willow stood there, poised in a professional navy suit, her hair swept into an elegant updo. I wanted to wish you luck, she said, extending her hand. Marcus took it, feeling that now familiar jolt at her touch. Same to you. Instead of withdrawing her hand, Willow held his gaze. Whatever happens today, I hope we can continue, whatever this is between us. Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate. And what exactly is this between us? He asked, his voice low. A slight flush colored her cheeks. I'm not entirely sure. But I'd like the chance to find out. Before he could respond, an assistant appeared in the hallway. Miss Aston, they're ready for you now. Willow squeezed his hand once before releasing it. See you on the other side, she murmured, then followed the assistant toward the presentation room. Marcus watched her go, his mind racing. In just a few hours, one of them would win a contract worth billions, and the other would lose. Could any relationship survive such an imbalance at its very beginning? He presented second, delivering his proposal with the confidence and authority that had built Zanetti shipping into an empire. The committee asked pointed questions, which he answered thoroughly and thoughtfully. When he finished, he felt cautiously optimistic. The waiting was excruciating. In the hotel bar, Marcus nursed a scotch, checking his watch every few minutes. The committee had promised a decision by 6 o'clock, and it was now approaching 5:30. His phone buzzed with a text from Willow. "Rooftop garden, meet me." Curious, he paid for his drink and took the elevator to the top floor. The rooftop garden was empty except for Willow, who stood near the edge, looking out at the Boston skyline. "Couldn't stand the waiting either?" he asked, joining her. She shook her head. "I keep second-guessing every word of my presentation." "I'm sure you were brilliant," Marcus said sincerely. Willow turned to face him, her expression serious. "Before we hear the decision, I need to say something." She took a deep breath. "I've spent 3 years seeing you as the competition. The arrogant billionaire who thought he owned the industry." Marcus winced, but she continued. "Then I got to know you really know you, the man who built on his family's legacy but made it his own, who cares deeply about his work, his employees, who can actually laugh at himself, despite what the business journals might suggest." She stepped closer. "If I win today, it's going to change the trajectory of Aston Maritime forever. And if you win, it secures Zanetti Shipping's position for years to come. Either way, our professional relationship will be complicated." "And personally?" Marcus asked, his heart thundering in his chest. "Personally," Willow said softly, "I find myself thinking about you far more than I should. Wondering what might be possible if we weren't always on opposite sides of the negotiating table." Marcus reached out, taking her hand in his. "I've been thinking the same thing." Their phones chimed simultaneously. The committee's decision was ready to be announced. They looked at each other, the moment suspended between them. "Whatever happens down there," Marcus said, bringing her hand to his lips, "this isn't over." They returned to the conference room together, maintaining a professional distance as they took their seats. Harold Hawthorne stood at the podium, his expression giving nothing away. "After careful consideration of all proposals," Hawthorne began, "the committee has reached a unanimous decision." He paused, looking directly at the finalists. "The Hawthorne Maritime Redevelopment Project will be awarded jointly to Zanetti Shipping and Aston Maritime, with the stipulation that the companies form a collaborative partnership for this specific initiative." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. Marcus looked at Willow in disbelief, finding her expression mirroring his own shock. "Our committee believes," Hawthorne continued, "that the complementary strengths of both organizations, Zanetti's established infrastructure and global reach, combined with Aston's innovative approaches and community integration, create an unbeatable combination that will serve our project's goals most effectively." As the announcement concluded and congratulations began, Marcus made his way to Willow's side. "Partners," he said, testing the word. A slow smile spread across her face. "Professionally and personally," he finished, keeping his voice low, "I'd like that very much." Later that evening, away from the crowds and celebrations, Marcus and Willow walked along the Boston harbor, their hands intertwined. "You realize this is unprecedented," Willow said. "The industry will talk." "Let them," Marcus replied, stopping to face her. "I've spent my entire adult life focused on building my company, thinking that was all that mattered. Then you walked into the picture and turned everything upside down." "Is that a complaint?" she asked, her eyes sparkling in the moonlight. "It's the best thing that's ever happened to me," he said honestly. "Working with you on Hawthorne will be challenging enough. Building whatever this is between us at the same time, that's going to require patience, communication." "Are you trying to talk yourself out of it?" Willow teased. Marcus shook his head, pulling her closer. "I'm trying to acknowledge that it won't be easy, but I think we're both used to taking on difficult challenges. And succeeding," she added, resting her hands on his chest. and succeeding, he agreed before lowering his lips to hers. Their first kiss was tentative at first, then deepened with a certainty that surprised them both. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, Marcus knew with absolute conviction that he'd found something far more valuable than any contract. 1 year later, the Hawthorne Maritime project was ahead of schedule and under budget. The partnership between Zanetti Shipping and Aston Maritime had proven so successful that they'd expanded their collaboration to other ventures, combining their strengths in ways that benefited both companies. On the anniversary of the contract award, Marcus took Willow back to the same Boston rooftop garden where they'd stood at a crossroads. This time, the garden was decorated with thousands of tiny lights and flowers. "What's all this?" Willow asked, her eyes wide as she took in the transformation. Marcus led her to the center of the garden where a small table was set with champagne. "I wanted to celebrate properly the project's success," she asked, accepting a glass. "That," he acknowledged, "and us. This past year has been the most challenging and rewarding of my life." Working together had indeed been challenging two strong personalities with established ways of doing business learning to compromise and collaborate. But the personal side of their relationship had flourished, growing deeper with each passing month. "I have something for you," Marcus said, reaching into his pocket. Willow's breath caught as he opened a small velvet box, revealing a stunning emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. "I used to think success was measured in contracts won and territories conquered," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in his stomach. "You showed me that true success is finding someone who challenges you, supports you, and loves you exactly as you are." He took a deep breath. "Willow Aston, will you marry me?" Tears glistened in her eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, Marcus marveled at how completely his life had changed. He'd entered the Hawthorne competition, determined to defeat Willow Aston at all costs. Instead, he'd found his partner in every sense of the word, the woman who challenged him to be better, who matched his ambition with her own, and who had shown him that the greatest victory wasn't in conquering the competition, but in finding love where he least expected it.